Vicki Hogarth and welcome to Southwest Magazine. On today's episode, I sit down with John Castell from Charlotte County Dial-A-Ride to find out how the important charity organization has impacted Charlotte County over the past 15 years and helped shape New Brunswick in the process. Thank you for being here today, John.
It's my pleasure.
Tell me first about, for people who don't know Dial-A-Ride, it's the 15th anniversary.
It is. We'll be celebrating that on the 19th of March at the Riverview Apartments in St. Stephen. There's a big room in there called the River Room, and anybody that's interested in knowing more about Dial-A-Ride or hearing about our history, our 15th anniversary celebration will start at 5:30 there, followed afterwards by our AGM, where you'll see what our last year has been like.
So many of us who live, especially in rural communities, have been impacted positively by Dial-A-Ride's presence, having friends that have used it as a service. But for people who may not know, can you tell us how it started and what it is?
Right, okay. It started thanks to Leslie Cuthbertson, was the executive director of the Fundy Community Foundation, and on behalf of the Fundy Community Foundation, she was having dialogues with not-for-profits, church groups, and others who provide assistance to people in Charlotte County. And the idea was to identify what were the needs, so that Fundy Community Foundation would be able to help direct funds towards the needs. And they dealt with seniors issues to youth issues, but one of the things that came up in all the dialogues was the difficulty for people in rural areas in New Brunswick to get transportation and to get to medical appointments and to get to work in some cases, that sort of thing. So that Leslie organized a special dialogue just on transportation, and she invited members of a program in Nova Scotia. It was the Kings County Dial-A-Ride program. There were 10 counties in Nova Scotia that had Dial-A-Ride programs where volunteer drivers provided transportation to seniors, disabled, and needy persons in the county. And it's not a taxi service, and they become members of the Dial-A-Ride program. It costs them $5 a month or $60 a year, and they pay a small fee based on the distance they travel. So if you're going to St. Stephen, for example, it'll be $8 over and $8 back. So it's a $16 drive, which certainly beats the taxi fee. It's a way of providing transportation for people in the county who otherwise it's a very difficult thing for them, and it's not easily available to them.
Now, $5 is a very reasonable membership fee, but are there other things that you have to in order to qualify? How does that work?
Well, the member who wants to become a member fills in an application form and identifies, am I disabled? Am I a senior? Am I low income? You know, if you're a millionaire, for sure, you're not going to become a member unless you're becoming a sponsor member. We do have that. We have a number of people that do help us out. But they fill that out, or they may be sponsored by a not-for-profit, like the food bank may sponsor one of the people that's there and recommend them to the Dial-A-Ride program to say, here's someone who needs this service. Or maybe a medical doctor that says, my patients are having difficulty being able to get to my service. Or somebody from the hospital that says, there are people that come up for dialysis and they have difficulty finding transportation to get up. So all of those different routes are ways that people can become aware of or apply to be a member of Dial-A-Ride.
Now, 15 years later, you've obviously become a huge part of the community. Can you give people an idea of the number of people, the number of rides that you're giving every day, and how many different types of people are using your services?
Okay, well, we have currently 27 drivers. They're volunteer drivers who use their own vehicle. They don't get any pay for their time, but there is a mileage allowance that's given. So they get 35 cents per kilometer to pay the expense of their vehicles, but there's no income or salary. That's volunteer. And in this last year, we had over 8,000 trips booked. A few of them get canceled because of snow or other things like that, but it was somewhere between 600 and 800 actual drives.
Wow. So now, I know that Charlotte County Dial-A-Ride was the first one in New Brunswick like it, but now I understand there are 19.
There are 19 services that are either called Dial-A-Ride or that where volunteers are providing transportation. And then there's a nice kind of a marriage. There is a provincial overview working group that works between all of those. And we have a neat little thing that if somebody needs to go to Fredericton, we can drive to the edge of Charlotte County, and the next county Dial-A-Ride program will pick the person up and take them where they need to go. And in the reverse, if there's somebody that's coming from Woodstock who wants to come to St. Andrews, maybe to see a specialist or something else, then we will meet their driver and bring them the rest of the way, then take them back and hand them off to the driver for the next county. So mostly our drivers drive in Charlotte County, with the exception that many of our members need to go to the hospital, either St. Joe's or the regional, or to medical appointments. There's a lot of people that go up for, like the seniors with macular degeneration, have a monthly treatment where the eyes are injected with something that slows the development. So those rides we do as well. But when we were first set up, we were only going to look after Charlotte County, because there are buses in St. John, but they don't come down here anymore.
So how does it work for someone who is interested in volunteering? And then as far as scheduling goes, beyond that, do you just say your availability? How does it work?
That's right. If someone wishes to be a driver, and I'm one, and I find it's very rewarding because you get to make new friends and you're providing service to somebody who really needs it. But to be a driver, you have to provide a copy of your driving record, which you get from Southwest New Brunswick. You have to have an RCMP security check or a criminal background check. You have to have $2 million of liability on your car. For us, that costs an extra $50 a year for both Tess and I, but it's well worth it for the rewards we get for being a driver. So you need a clean driving record. You need to be a capable driver. And
do you say like when you're available to drive? Can you call last minute?
What you do is you give our dispatcher, we have an executive director and we have a dispatcher. So somebody needs a ride, they call into the dispatcher. But if you're a volunteer driver, what you do is you say, okay, I'm available Wednesday afternoons, Friday mornings, or whatever times you have. And then when somebody's called and says, I would like a ride on Wednesday going up to the hospital in St. John, then she can look down and say, oh, who's available?
Okay.
And we have a nice new software program that we've just gotten a grant from Fundy Community Foundation that allows us to sort of expand our service. So it's a computerized ride booking service that a lot of other similar organizations in the United States and others, it's been developed, and you can go on that and you can see what rides are available required in the next month, and you can say, okay, that's a good ride and I can do it if it's in. So it saves our dispatcher a little bit of time, because as a driver, each of the drivers can check this on a regular basis and see what rides are requesting.
So you mentioned Fundy Community Foundation as being one of the huge supporters of Dial-A-Ride. What organizations are involved as part of the network that makes this all happen?
A lot of the community service groups, the Fundy Community Foundation, the Volunteer Center in St. Stephen, the Vocational Center as well. There are a lot of people that go to the Vocational Center in St. Stephen who need transportation. These are special needs people who are actively involved in learning sort of trades and skills. And so that's a service. The social development, provincial, they have people that they're supporting, and they will know when some of them need a drive for medical purposes and everything else. They even provide the mileage fee for the people that they're supporting, so that it's not coming out of their pocket. It saves them, because it's the province a lot, because they're not paying a taxi fee, which they might otherwise have to do. So it's a win-win. Some of the churches, a lot of the doctors may refer their patients to, if they have someone that they know doesn't have transportation, then they can recommend. And I try to get the cards about Dial-A-Ride in each of the medical centers, so that the information's there for their patients who may need the service.
And you also work with the local food banks to deliver.
We do.
How does that work?
That works well. It can be two different ways. Our member who are low income and who would like to go to the food bank, they just call up and arrange for the drive 2 days in advance and say, I would like to go to the food bank in St. Stephen or the food bank in St. George, and they've called the food bank and arranged that they would be able to come and get food, then we can drive them there. Or there are cases where the person's even not so well and doesn't want to drive, and we will pick up the food and take them to the member.
Now, I've had the privilege of hearing some of your stories about being a driver. Right. And how it's impacted your life. Can you share just one or two about some of the people you've met and how you've been impacted by just sharing part of their story?
Right. Actually, it'd be hard to hold it to just the three because there's so many people that have touched my heart. One specific, we talk about disabled, there was a teacher in St. George who was wheelchair bound, and she needed transportation to and from the school there every day. And it was so nice because, she wouldn't have a job if she couldn't get there. And to be able to go bring her out on the wheelchair, help her get into the seat, put the wheelchair in the back. And then when she's there, we get the wheelchair back out and wheel her into the school. And then she's in, teaches all day. And then one of the drivers will come pick her up again. Someday, we'd like to have a small van that has the wheelchair ramp and the clips for such people as that. So that's one of the things we've managed the best we can, but we could do better with some help and funding. I'm looking for some kind of sponsoring organization that would be like to help us get a wheelchair-equipped vehicle.
For people who want to donate on their own, are there ways to do that? Just go to the website?
We have a web page, and you can donate on there, or you can call 466-4444 anytime. That's a nice number, easy to remember. That's the Dial-A-Ride number. So if you're a member, you book your rides there. If you're a driver and you want to find out what drives are available for you to do, you can call that number.
Now, for instance, say someone is interested in donating time but might not be free all the time. Can you say, I could take someone Monday morning only? Or
if you can only drive once a month even,
okay,
then we'd be delighted to have you sign up and become a driver with us. Or if you're only available on Friday mornings, that's fine. Or if you're available every day of the week, there are some of us that end up driving every day with Dial-A-Ride because the need's there.
How have you noticed it? Obviously in rural New Brunswick, without public transportation the way you would have in a big city, it can impact even our population growth.
That's right.
How have you seen it impact the community as a whole since its beginning till now?
Right. Well, when we first set up 15 years ago, Acadia Bus Lines had two buses that would come from St. John down through to St. Stephen and back again. But you had the bus that went from St. Stephen about 7:30 or 8, I don't remember exactly when it would go up. There would be a second bus that would go up around noon and up. There'd be a bus back about noon from St. John down, and then one at 5. That goes back to, for example, a 50 or 75-year-old gentleman who lived outside of St. Stephen and who had cancer. And he, when the bus was still running, would come in to he'd walk, I think it was about 3 miles. He walked into St. Stephen, took the bus up to St. John, but the bus didn't go to the hospital, so he had to get a taxi from the hospital, from the bus to the hospital, have his chemotherapy, and then he didn't get done in time to get the 12 o'clock bus, so he had to wait for the 5 o'clock bus. So here's a gentleman, 75 years old, suffering with cancer, having gone through the chemotherapy, which knocks the hell out of you, until he could get a taxi to the bus station, bus back to St. Stephen, and ride home.
Wow.
And what a difference for him to be able to have one of us drivers go to his home, knock on the door and say, "You ready?" We'd bring him up to the oncology department where he'd go in for his chemotherapy. We even walk in with him and we'll wait. I usually have a nice book I can read, or we can go do some shopping and come back when his appointment's over, put his seat back so we can have a little rest because he's driving straight back to his home and let him out. What a difference that makes. And that's just one small example of when we did have a bus, And it wasn't long after the Acadia line sold out to the French company. The French company that was here running the bus service decided to just totally discontinue. So for quite a few years we didn't have a bus. Then the Lynx applied for and got grants from the provincial government and worked with Maritime Bus to try and get a bus route going again. Now their idea was to try and at least come back and have what the Acadia bus lines were doing, 2 trips a day. But Maritime Bus felt that that didn't work out for them. And then rather than make it convenient for somebody who had to go to work in St. John, that they would have a ride up and be able to bring them back, like up for 9 start and down for 5 finish. They matched the bus up so that they could be a feeder line to the bus to Moncton or the bus to Fredericton. So half the people that were going up were going somewhere outside of St. John.
Wow.
But when the money that was given by the provincial government to support Lynx to Go ran out, then the bus just canceled that service again. So we're back to being a rural community with no bus service between any St. Stephen, St. George, Rolling Dam, or anywhere up to St. John and back again. That's, I think, partly why we got up to over 8,000 rides booked last year. And so far, January and February of this year, we're up about 20% over what we had last year in terms of rides booked. So we're an important service, and transportation in all of the rural counties is difficult. Now, having had the example with our Dial-A-Ride, we've been out as ambassadors talking in Woodstock and various other counties. There are now 19 services in New Brunswick, and there was a nice article in the paper 1 week ago or 2 weeks ago about the Sussex Dial-A-Ride program. And it says one of the rewards is to see a valuable service is done well enough here that we now are recognizing the need, and if the bus lines and the commercial services are not providing it, then the community and volunteer people do it.
So one of the most beautiful things living in a community like this is that when there is a need, people step up to the plate. If the government doesn't do it, we find a way. But because you're on the ground and you're seeing the need firsthand, what do you think the government could be doing to better facilitate people living in rural communities?
Well, where we have the 19 organizations now, and there are grants, but what they do is they give $50,000 each one. We had 8,000 rides booked last year. Some are new and don't nearly that number. So that in order to be able to do the service we do, we have to apply for grants. We get support from each of the municipalities, which we greatly appreciate. There are foundations. We have individuals like our lovely Lucinda Fleemer, who supports it, and a lot of other nice donors. And without that, we wouldn't be able to do what we do.
Do you think that they're, just from your firsthand knowledge, and we're always going back to the drawing board trying to figure out how do we have a public transit system in a rural area, do you see that being something that could be done well?
Yeah,
to complement Dial-A-Ride.
Yeah, what I like the idea of this that we do is it's community and people based and started, so that we provided something, went to the government for support rather than asking the government to do something to start with. So that I think in each of the areas where there's a need, and that's one of the things Funding Community Foundation sort of focuses on, let's start it and let's do it. We'll get support for the government as appropriate, but what you need, and for myself, I've lived many different places in Canada, the United States. I find St. Andrews, there are so many good people and so many organizations helping others. It's like we're not part of the real world. You look at all of the stories on the news these days of people killing people and all the terrible things. I think it's a beautiful place to live because there is so many people that are helping other people here. There's more we can do, but
touches my heart every day the way people step up to the plate and make our lives happen. Have you noticed that you've been able to allow people to stay in a community that's so special because you offer this service?
I think so. Oh yeah.
One of the most heartbreaking things for me would to have to leave here if, let's say,
a lot of people seniors that are living in their own home. They don't have to necessarily go to one of the hospital wards or that. They can get their regular drives to their medical appointments. They can go and get the treatment for their eyes, or a lot of people that we've been taking for dialysis in St. John. If you have a failing kidney, you may have to go and live close to the hospital, so you can go for that. But you can live here in this beautiful community with so many giving people and still get your rides up to St. John on a regular basis for those sort of things. Or if you're suffering with cancer and you need radiation or chemotherapy, we're there and we're happy to drive you there. We're happy to spend time with you, and then we feel rewarded as a driver that we can be providing that needed service and making this such a nice place to live.
I know we've touched on this, but just to stress one more time, people that might have time to donate, that might, be financially strapped in terms of the gas and the mileage on their cars. That's something that is compensated if necessary.
That's right. The drivers get 35 cents per kilometer for their drive. That's from their home till they get back to their home for looking after our members. Now, there's a lot of the drivers that appreciate what Dial-A-Ride is enough that they may donate that money back, not required and not asked, but when you get so touched by what the service does for the people you're helping.
Do you have drivers that say maybe they live here and go to work in St. John? Can they say, hey, I leave every day at this time?
Yeah, and I'm going to be going up, and or take Tessa up for some dental appointment.
That could probably even help people with gas expenses. There are a lot of commuters.
Anytime we're going to go to St. John, that we check with Jeannie, our dispatcher, and say, well, we're going to go up anyway. If there's anybody that needs going up this time, we can stay longer if they've got an appointment that can fit around what ours are.
Now, how does your dispatch center work with Jeannie? She's, I believe, 9 to 5 during the week. 9 to 5 there. But you can leave a message anytime?
There's an answering machine, so you can leave a message.
Okay, so if I'm calling, say I call Saturday and I need something Monday, is that still work? It's
she's got to have time in order to find the driver who's available for the time. So if you want to go Monday, you should talk to her on Thursday.
Now, if you always have an appointment Thursday in St. John,
you can book them in advance. We have some appointments that are booked as much as a month or two in advance, so that if you know you're going to go somewhere, like if you have the dialysis that you have to go to and you're going to have it scheduled regular, you can just have it booked up. And with this nice new program that we just got with funding from the Fundy Community Foundation, then we are able to have the whole year ahead booked. And it's nice too, because it also tracks all of the distance, all the drives and all the services. So when we have to provide a report to the Vibrant Community Charlotte, who provide us with the provincial government money, and we give them a report to show what we're doing with the money that's come from the provincial government, then this program will help us give them a nice report and show, even with nice little graphs, how many we've driven to work, how many we've driven to school, how many we've driven to a social event, how many we've driven for picking up their groceries and drugs. And
now, do some drivers and people that use the service foster relationships over time where maybe I always drive the same person?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I have a lot of very favorite members who I like to drive. One I'll be picking up tomorrow morning. And she's one of the rides that I do up to 5 or 6 or 7 times a week.
Now, I know that Dial-A-Ride tries to work within business hours, but with people that might have special needs, be it a job and a time frame that doesn't work on schedule, can you make special arrangements?
Yes, our office is 9 to 5, but we had a couple who were living on social assistance, and he found out that he could get a job working for a fish processing plant, but the job was 6 till 6, a 12-hour shift. So a driver who was willing would get up at 4:30 in the morning in order to be at his home in time to pick him up and get him to the plant for 6 a.m. And then to be there at 6 p.m. when he got off to drive him home and then back home again. So that would be getting up at 4:30 and being back home at their own home at about 7:30 in the evening. Now, they're not on duty all that time. They go back home after they've driven them to the plant. So they've got a lot of their own life during the day. But that sort of accommodation can be done, but that's at the discretion. A volunteer driver has to say yes, I'd be delighted. And as soon as you get to see how much difference that makes, and this couple, within weeks of getting the job and starting, after the first couple of paychecks, that person then has credit, was able to organize to buy his own used car. They're off social assistance.
Wow.
The Department of Social Development no longer is putting out money but there's now somebody paying taxes and supporting the government again. So a lot of win-win stories within Dial-A-Ride.
And that's one of the beautiful things about it is I think people might not realize it goes beyond just appointments.
Yeah.
How many, I guess you probably couldn't put a number to it, but have you seen a lot of impact in terms of changing people's lives by connecting them to opportunities they wouldn't have had without?
Absolutely. That was just one example of the many similar sorts of situations. There are a lot of people who, for one reason or other, have dropped out of school. They end up having very, very low income jobs, maybe working as a waitress, and would like to go on, and now they've seen a bit of the world. And you have the GED program. And there's some people where on a daily basis, till they get through that program, one of our drivers are picking them up at their home, bringing them to the program, or are there work readiness programs. So there's a program that was running in St. George, and we would drive someone there on a regular basis.
And you've even had the opportunity to drive someone till he could afford his own car.
That's right. Their rewards are just tremendous for the drivers, and you develop lifelong friends this way too.
Well, congratulations on 15 years, and thank you so much for telling me more about Dial-A-Ride today, John.
It's a true pleasure for me. And I appreciate an opportunity to share what Dial-A-Ride's all about in Charlotte County with everyone else.
Well, I hope that more people call to volunteer or use the service just based on seeing this.
Yeah, don't forget, 466-4444.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO-TV, New Brunswick's only source for independent community television.